All right, everyone, welcome back to our Young Writers Can Change the World Summit. We have an incredible session for you this late afternoon, evening, depending on where you are. And I can't wait for you to learn from two people that we love to learn from, people we look up to, and that is Mary Weber and CJ Redwine. These are two best-selling authors, coaches, teachers, consultants who are supporting writers through incredible programs like the Writer's Sanctuary, the Red Herring Society, and of course, writing incredible books that deeply impact people's lives. And that's exactly what they are here to talk about today. So I'm going to welcome to the stage Mary Weber and CJ Redwine. Thank you both so much for being here and speaking to our young writers.
Thank you so much for having us. We are so excited to be here, and we can't wait to dive into our presentation today. I'm CJ Redwine. This is my friend and partner in alleged crimes, Mary Weber. And we own the Writer Sanctuary together, and that is a business, as Brett mentioned, that really helps to educate writers and provide community, mentorship, and retreats, both domestic and international. We even have a secret writing society called the Red Herring Society, but you're totally invited to join. The secret is out, but only for you, right? So we are so thrilled to be here today.
Yes, and thank you, Brett. I appreciate that, and a very nice intro, and I'm happy to be here too with everybody. I love young people. They make me feel young. I have young people of my own, as does CJ. So this is quite a delight for us. Young people in writing, that's like our happy space. Yeah. So as Brett said, CJ and I, besides owning our businesses, we both are best-selling authors. I think between the two of us, we have like 20 books now, and we have a nonfiction writing book coming out this fall in October. So we're just glad to be here, glad to get to talk about all of this with you, and specifically with this topic. So our topic that we brought to Brett and just said, hey, this is something that we would love to talk on is, in fact, let me open it up here. There we go. Is just the impact that our stories have on people's lives. It's something that CJ and I feel really passionate about in our own stories, in our own lives. I worked with teenagers. I was a youth pastor for 16 years. CJ was a teacher for many years. And so we particularly have a fondness for young people and knowing what teens and college students, the passion that they can bring to the page. And sometimes it feels very different than what some of us older folks bring to the page when we come, and, experiences are different and both are valid. And one of the things I love is reading the writing of young people and seeing what they're bringing to the page, because it's such a great filter of what is going on in their culture, and it specifically, their micro culture, and their reflections and perspectives on our bigger culture. And so we just really passionately believe that when we become vulnerable on a page, no matter what age you are, and you begin to open yourself up and pour into the story, that your readers connect with that in a way that is totally different than any other medium, right? It's a different type of creativity. It's a different type of art. And when it can experience you on a page in a story, no matter what the story is, it creates this, not only this reader connection, but it really creates an impact that, as we say here, it changes lives, and it changes, generations of lives. And we've seen that over time with different books that have impacted society at different key points throughout history. And so let's dive into this. What is the purpose, right, of crafting a story? So as writers, especially young adult writers, you hold the unique ability to shape perspectives in it, like I said, in a different way than maybe an older generation does. You have a different way of inspiring action and creating connections through the stories that you tell, and you can create them with readers, like I said, in a different way, because you're using a different tone, you're using a different atmosphere, you're using different dialect, so to speak. You're using a different voice oftentimes, and seeing things through a different filter. And so you're able to reach an impact in ways that I don't know that I ever would be able to at this point. why do these stories matter? So throughout history, stories have been used to inspire personal and cultural change, just like I said. For example, books like To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee or The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins, not only did those entertain readers or horrify them, depending, but it also sparked conversations about justice, courage, and the human spirit. And those were things that you could see those ripple effects go across, in their time period, and they continue to this day.
So what we want to talk about then is the transformative power of stories before we get into the how to do this. So when we look at what books can do, what a story can really do for the right reader. Will this do it for every reader? No. Some readers will just be entertained. Some won't be entertained and they'll go find somebody else to read, and that's totally fine too. That's why we have so many different genres and so many books on the shelves. But for the right reader, who feels seen and understood and begins to reimagine their world or reimagine their path through it, a story can be absolutely transformational. A story can help shape beliefs and perspectives. A story can inspire personal growth and inspire action, social action or action in their personal lives. A story can provide comfort and healing. I bet all of you right now, if I said, what's your comfort book? You've got something that pops to your mind right away, and you think, oh, right, this is the book that I would always return to. I know for me, growing up, it was The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis. What was yours, Mary?
It was The Secret Garden.
Okay. So you can see immediately something comes to your mind where you're just like, I remember how that book made me feel. And I think that's one of those really important distinctions here. Lots of books entertain. Lots of books take us new places, give us new adventures. But the books that we remember how we felt as we read them tend to be the books that really have the power to transform. Other things that books can do, they can build empathy and understanding. And this is so incredible. We can introduce readers to different types of people, different types of life experiences, different types of trauma or healing or beliefs or viewpoints or bodies, all of those things. And we can build empathy and understanding for people who are living those life experiences in a way that no other medium really can, because you can usher the reader into that person's mind and really let them live in their heart and their mind for the duration of the story. And those stories can also create a sense of connection and community. When you see yourself in literature, you see something that you just respond to, you have that sense of connection. But also when you meet other readers who really responded to that, I bet some of you out there were like, yes, Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, or oh, yes, Secret Garden, I loved it. And it created an immediate sense of connection. Let's be besties. And a sense of community with us, as well it should, because books bring people together. It's amazing when that happens. And when you're the person that wrote the book and you see people coming together, it's surreal and it's an incredible, incredible thing. And then finally, one of the most important transformational powers of stories is to draw a roadmap for hope. A lot of times what we can do in stories is we can explore really difficult things, and we can do it in a land full of dragons and wizards and princesses, or a sports competition or a baking show or a spaceship or wherever we want to do it. But we're really exploring some really tough heart issues and tough experiences and tough feelings that people have. And when our characters go through that and feel it, then come out the other side and they find light again and they find hope, it can give a reader the sense that, hey, actually I could find hope too, and maybe that's the way that I could do it.
I think these last three that you mentioned are particularly stand out to me, because I just think about our culture right now and how much we need empathy, right? We need voices of empathy. And something that I found interesting over the last few years, especially my latter years of youth pastoring, was how much contrast there seemed to be between the empathy in stories and even the empathy in our young people versus the empathy online. or the lack of empathy online, right? We live in such a cancel culture. We live in a culture where everything is, be rage now and then look up the facts later. Be upset now and judge now and jump to conclusions now. And then, afterwards, maybe, get a different perspective on things. And so, especially I was thinking about during this political season and during the last political season where people, it's just, we lack an empathy online. And it's interesting to me that we can read online and there's a lack of empathy there so often. And yet when we pick up a book, how much we can connect with a book versus, they're both forms of reading, but there's something about stories when we're reading those that really bring out the empathy in people. And I think it's because we actually take the time to learn about a new perspective. We're spending time in somebody else's mind and they're beginning to change our perspective. And so I just love the power of that, because through empathy comes community, right? We may not agree on everything, but there's this sense of, but there are certain things that we can just connect with on a very basic human level. So we're going to talk about 3 strategies to do this in your own book, right? So we can go, yay, stories, they change people, they can change lives. We hope that they do. How do you do it? How do you do it well in a way that people are going to pick up your book and go, this is the secret garden of my world, right? Mm-hmm. Or this was the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe of my childhood. That's what we want to help you do. So, and it's what we help our writers do, our regular clients do. And so it's something that we get very excited about, because to us, this is a big purpose of writing. So number 1, we're going to talk about authentic emotional journeys. Number 2, we're going to talk about weaving in themes of hope and resilience. And then number 3, we're going to talk about including your life lessons, faith, and values, and how to do that well versus, clubbing someone over the head with
versus coming at them with a hammer.
That's right. Versus preaching. So I'm going to start with authentic emotional journeys. When we talk about authentic emotional journeys, we're talking about your book could be read by 1,000 different people. But when you have 2 people come up to you at a conference or at a reader event or at a book fair or via your email, and they are crying and they just say, man, I didn't know anyone else felt the way I did, or I so connected with that. Or as I've had a lot of times with in person, but also in my email, notes from readers saying, thank you for talking about this, because nobody else in my life has talked about this. And this book was a safe space for me. So that relatability, that's what those readers are talking about. It's like, I look at them and I'm like, this is the person I wrote the book for, right? Like everybody else, I'm glad if you enjoyed it or you hated it, sorry, but this is the person that I wrote this book for.
Yeah.
So it's that relatability. Readers connect with characters who experience genuine, relatable emotions. When you are working in a story and you are making sure that your characters seem human, that they have those human emotions, those human feelings, that's what our readers connect with, right? Because they are putting themselves in the mind of your characters. So when your characters are facing challenges, joys, sorrows, traumas that mirror real life experiences, readers are more likely to see themselves in that story. This connection keeps them engaged and invested in the narrative. So not only does it do the benefit of a reader wanting, feeling seen and being able to relate with that, but it also keeps them reading because they want more of that. So it stirs up that hunger in them. And then a depth of emotion. Portraying a wide spectrum of emotions from joy to grief, anger to love will add depth to your characters and your story. And yes, we know this. Yes, we've been taught this in tons of different writing classes, especially if you've gone to conferences. This is kind of like the standard. But yet there's a level of emotion that is not, we talk about put emotion in your characters. And then CJ and I like to talk about put emotion in your characters, that depth where it's gut wrenching, right? It's that thing that I usually tell people, whatever in you, wherever there's a space in you that you're afraid to go, that you're like, oh, but that one's uncomfortable, or I don't feel comfortable. I don't talk about that. I don't like to expose that. It doesn't mean that you have to expose that whole place on a page, but that's that place that you're tapping into to know, I know how scary it can be, right? I know how painful it can be. I know how traumatic life can be, but I also know how good life can be. But it's hard to sell people on the goodness of life sometimes if you can't also sell them on the fact that you understand the pain and the hardness of life. So those go together, they go hand in hand. For instance, in The Fault in Our Stars by John Green, the raw emotions of love, fear, and loss resonated so deeply with readers that they made the story unforgettable. So, and a lot of that is because the emotions in that story are what drive the characters' decisions. They create conflicts between the characters, but they ultimately shape that whole narrative arc. So here's some techniques for writing emotion. Number one, the classic, don't hate me, show, don't tell. Instead of stating that a character is sad, show their sadness through their actions, dialogue, and physical reactions. We all know this, right? A little easier to say than to do. But for example, instead of writing, she was sad, you could write, she stared at the old photograph, her hands trembling as tears blurred her vision. So which one of those, connects with you more? Obviously, it's going to be the one where she is doing something visibly that we could connect with. Have you ever found yourself where you're reading a story and someone walks in the room and you realize that you've got a weird look on your face, and it's because you're mimicking the look of the character in the book? Okay, is that just me? Maybe it's just me, but my husband regularly, like, he'll walk in the room and he's like, "What are you smiling at?" Or like, "Are you angry?" And I'm like, "What? No. I'm just reading. I'm feeling all the emotions." Okay. But that means it's a well-written story. It means that I'm not just flat on a page going, "Okay, I guess she felt sad. They told me that." I'm experiencing it because even my facial expressions are morphing into what they're telling me that character's expressions are. So that's what we mean by show versus tell. And then next is add in sensory details. Engage the five senses to immerse readers in the emotional experience. I think in every single developmental edit letter that I ever send a client, I have a section, and CJ probably does too, on sensory details. In every single scene, I want to taste the air, right? I want to smell the good or bad. I want to feel what that atmosphere feels like. I want to be able to see and hear. So describe the sounds, the smells, and the emotional and the sights that go along with that emotional moment. It doesn't mean that you hear everything or you smell or you see everything, but pick that one thing. What is the strong thing? Because have you ever been in a situation where you've gotten bad news, or maybe you've gotten good news? But either way, it's not like all of a sudden you're hearing the refrigerator running and the car's outside. All of a sudden it's either life goes totally quiet and all you hear is the ticking of a clock, or life goes totally quiet and all you notice is, there's water on the floor. It's so interesting how our bodies and our minds will focus in on one or two details. And that's why years later, if someone's been through a trauma, years later, they can smell something and it will trigger them right back to that emotion, right back to that day. And a lot of times you'll see, they'll have a panic attack because it's like their whole body will freeze up because it reminds them, their fight, flight, or freeze kind of, jumps up. And because that smell stuck out to them because it's something that their subconscious remembered. In the same way, a nostalgic smell. There are times where I will walk into my parents' house and there's just a certain smell and it will take me back to when I was 4 years old. My parents don't even live in the same house as they did when I was 4 years old, but yet there's something about that takes me back and it makes me feel at home again, right? When I smell fresh cut grass, it reminds me of being home and my dad cutting the grass and laying in my room on a Sunday afternoon after church. So those sensory details, for instance, the scent of a rain after a long drought can evoke a sense of renewal and hope. So you can use them to enhance the scene that way. Or you can use, thriller writers, we do it all the time. We're bringing in that sense of tension, and that rain could also be a bad thing, right? There can be rain after a long drought and it means something's coming. So you can use that and play with it. Finally, for this is draw from experience. Tap into your own emotional experiences to write authentically. Again, this is something that I have heard over and over and over, and we're just asking you to take it to a little bit deeper level. If you've experienced loss, you're going to use those feelings to inform your writing. It doesn't mean that you have to have experienced the exact same thing, right? When they say write what you know, there's a lot in my life that I don't know that I write about. There's a lot in your life that you're going to write about, or that you probably already are, that you may not know about. But that's not what we mean by write what you know. When we talk about write what we know, what you know, we mean write that feeling. All of us know the feeling of loss. I may not have lost someone or something in the same way that somebody else did, but I have experienced the depth of loss in my own life, that it has caused grief. It has caused me to, for months, be a disaster, right? It causes me still to this day to reflect back on that and feel that sense of longing and that sense of heartache. So those are the things that we mean when we talk about, write what you know, write the joys that you know. You may not have experienced someone else's level of success or success in a certain area, but you can understand that feeling of elation that comes when you know that you've accomplished something amazing. So write the feelings, write from the emotions that you know. Readers can often sense when emotions in a story come from a place of truth, and likewise they can sense when they come from a place that is shallow. It's not that they're false emotions. It's just that you've just scratched the surface of certain emotions, right? That you didn't actually take us deeper to what's really going on. An example of this, I'll just say from my own life, is when I was writing my very first book, Storm Siren. I had been taken on by an agent. I'd only had like 3 chapters of the book written, and Thomas Nelson, HarperCollins, had signed me for a 3-book contract of this book that I'd written like 3 to 5 chapters in. I think by the time I signed the contract, I'd had 5 chapters written. And this wonderful agent named Lee Huff had very kindly taken me on. I barely knew him, but he began working with me on the story because I had like 6 more months before I had to deliver it. And so he began coaching me and working with me on it. And as we worked together, I came to know him better and just really, really came to adore him. What a special, precious man he was. Well, shortly before the book was released, he passed away from a brain tumor, just out of the blue. Things happened. And there was such a sense of loss in me. And I was towards the end of the book, and I knew I had to finish the book, and I didn't want to write. I didn't want to do anything. It was like, what's the point of all this? Right. And so I took 2 weeks off. I just took 2 weeks just to feel and process. And then I sat down and I wrote one of the final chapters in my book. And I wrote that thing from start to finish. And I think it's the only chapter in any of my books that I've ever written that did not have to be edited. What you got on the page was just raw me. And it was a scene of grief. That is the scene that ever since then, I always will get emails from readers about. And that book has sold, I think, like around 100,000 copies. So I get a lot of emails from readers. And that is the one scene that they all will email me and say, I was sobbing during this scene, or I'm angry, how could you do this? Or I feel seen because, I had a similar loss in my own life. Mm-hmm. And so for me, it was that rawness on a page, didn't have to be edited. And that's what people connected with, right? They connected with that sense of loss because I was willing to be vulnerable on the page to say, this is how it felt. Even though what I was writing was a very different situation than the loss of my agent, it was still writing from that same level of emotion.
And I think that's really the key there, is going back into some of those hard places that we have in our lives. And you don't have to rewrite the same cause. I have hard places in my life that I'll never put on the page. I can't get that close to it again and put it on the page, but I can go back to it enough that I can go back and access the emotion. And so that's what we're talking about, is if your character is experiencing fear, when were you afraid? Mm-hmm. If your character is experiencing grief, as Mary was saying, when were you feeling grief? And what did that do in your body? And that's the difference between just saying she felt sad, she felt afraid. What was happening inside of your body? What happened in your thoughts? I remember with Defiance, which was my first published book, the character, there's a scene in the first quarter of the book where she is traumatized and she experiences a break with reality for a little bit. And I wrote that scene. It was, again, as Mary said, one that I didn't have to go back and edit. One of the only ones I did not have to go back and edit. but it's because I really knew how to plug into that, having experienced something like that when I was younger. Far different cause, obviously. And as a result, Defiance, the series, is this whole post-apocalyptic fantasy and big Leviathan like monsters tunneling up from underground, and we're in city states and all these things. But what it really is the story of a girl who is traumatized and broken, and her slow climb back to healing, or road back to healing. And so I wrote that it was like she'd been silenced inside, and she just felt like this overwhelming silence where her emotions used to be, because she kept pushing them away, saying, I can't feel that right now. And my publisher wanted me to take it out and said, no, that doesn't make sense. You can't feel silence. And I was like, I'm so glad you've never experienced that. I know what I'm saying. This is true. This is a true depiction of what it was like for me with PTSD and clinical depression. And I want to keep it in, because the readers that don't know that, it won't matter. They'll still enjoy the story. But the readers that need to feel seen are going to feel seen. And sure enough, that's the thing that people come up to me occasionally crying. And I've never seen somebody talk about how it actually is. It gave me language to talk about my own life. It gave me a way to start to think about my own feelings and whether what I'm doing is actually healthy and whether I need help. So when we talk about how we're passionate about this, it's because we know that if you're willing and bold and courageous enough to access some of those hard pieces and be honest about how it really feels and put that on a page, it's so incredibly impactful. And it's okay to take a break after you do that. I know Mary did. I did too. We're just like, okay, I can't write again for a few days because
you step away.
Whoo, I need to, let me go do something like sit in the sun and sip some tea and not think for a while. That sounds great. Okay. So
the idea, real quick, the idea of giving language to something is it's just so beautifully put, because there are people, the majority of people will never write a book, right? I mean, the percentages is like ridiculously low of people that want to write a book compared to the people that will actually finish writing a book.
Right.
And so, but there are a lot of readers out there. And so you have this opportunity. I mean, what an incredible opportunity, right? To be able to give language and put language to somebody else's pain, somebody else's grief, to somebody else's joy, somebody else's healing and hope, that they may never be able to do, whether because they're not going to write a book, or because they're not going to go to therapy, or because they don't have the access, they don't have the financial or, just the physical access to go to therapy, to have someone else help them put language to what they've gone through. And so what a beautiful opportunity that we get opportunity, that we get to do that for other people.
Yes. I see it for me as a sacred responsibility to be excruciatingly honest about trauma or hope or healing, what it really is, and those emotions. And I know Mary does the same thing in her books, and that's what we're here for, right? That's what we're here to do, is to equip you to do that and to encourage you to do that. It doesn't matter that not everybody will get it, and not everybody needed to get it. It matters for the person who did. And so our next strategy then in walking you through this is to weave in themes of hope and resilience. It's important that we are honest about anger or pain or, grief, depression, those kind of things. But it's equally important that we don't leave them there, right? We weave in themes of hope and resilience. These have a universal appeal. Themes of hope and resilience, they're powerful. They speak to the fundamental human experience. They speak to what we all want. Everybody wants to read the book or watch the movie or watch the show where there is a triumphant ending at the end, right? Good triumphing over evil, or the girl gets the guy, or whatever it happens to be. They rescue the kid that's been kidnapped. Whatever the genre is, we want to feel hope. We want to see characters who experience real pain and real obstacles in their life. And we want to see them overcome those and show resilience and build resilience into them, because it shows us that there's hope for that for us. And it helps us to see how that's possible and how we might mimic some of those behaviors in our real lives. The themes resonate with readers because they embody the courage we all aspire to, and they point readers to a better future. And then it helps balance that light and dark. Now, again, depending on the genre, there are a couple genres where it's all mostly light, right? And that's totally fine if that's the genre convention. But you've got to have a little bit of dark in there for the light to really shine. But a lot of the genres, there's a pretty even balance there. And for the light to actually feel meaningful and earned to the reader and to have that emotional impact, they need to have walked through the dark with the characters so that it feels victorious. It feels honestly hopeful at the end. Incorporating hope and resilience involves balancing those moments of struggle with the moments of triumph. Those moments of triumph have to be earned. If they're just handed out like, an old woman handing out Werther's candy, it is not going to feel satisfying to the reader. In fact, they're going to roll their eyes and get upset that they wasted their time with this because the main character didn't get pushed. They didn't have to really give up anything, sacrifice anything, go through anything hard, face a deep fear. They didn't have to do any of that. They weren't hurt at all. And so we get a little resentful because we get hurt. We face obstacles and we don't care to see somebody, walking along, picking up butterscotch candy, just, willy-nilly as you please, and nobody stops them. We want to see this person went through hard things. I recognize that. I know what that's like. And then they triumphed. That's inspiring. They need to see those characters face those hardships, and then they need to see the possibility of overcoming. This is what makes The Book Thief, I don't know if any of you have read that, but The Book Thief by Markus Zusak, so impactful because we have the incredible pain, trauma, and darkness of war, and it's contrasted by the resilience and the kindness of the human spirit. And if you didn't have that backdrop, it wouldn't matter. The kindness of it's easy to be kind and resilient when your life is all sunshine and daisies. It's hard when you're putting so much on the line and there's so much darkness around you and you shine so much brighter for that. And those are the stories that we're really drawn to. So let's talk about how to do that. Okay, some techniques for integrating those themes. The first is be subtle. Be subtle. This is a skill that is learned over time. You are probably not going to be subtle your first time through your draft, or maybe even the second. That's okay. You're just telling yourself the story and figuring out what you're working with. But by the time you're ready to query this to agents or it's ready for publication, this needs to be subtly integrated. Nobody likes somebody coming at them, beating them over the head with the hammer. So weaving those themes into the character arcs and the plot arcs should look natural. For example, a character who lost everything, but then finds the strength to get back up and help others and reach out beyond themselves is embodying resilience. And we don't have to actually have long paragraphs of exposition explaining this character's resilience. We want to demonstrate everything. We're coming back to show, don't tell, which we talked about with emotions. That's true for these themes as well. We're not going to pause the story and break the fourth wall and look at the reader and say, now, what you're seeing here is that hope is for everyone and resilience is important. And here's how you build it. That just takes away from the impact of the story completely. Instead, we just want to show it. Show when that character loses hope, and then show when that hope flickers back to life, and show how it carries them through. Show the courage it takes to be resilient in the face of hardship and darkness. When you can show that happening in your characters, now you've subtly integrated it and you've created that sort of inspired connection with your reader. Character resilience, as we were just talking about here, character resilience is a great way for you to show this. You create characters who, despite the challenges they face, continue to grow and find strength. Katniss Everdeen is an example of this in The Hunger Games, because in that first book, her resilience is shown through her actions and decisions, not her words. You can see how she goes from, I'm going to die. Like I don't have any chance here, to hang on. I've one more day. Wait a minute. I have people to protect. Wait a minute. I have people to care about. Wait a minute. I'm angry. Wait a minute. Why did you put us here in the first place? We're not going to play your game, and you lose. We win. And there was that whole arc for that. That's incredible resilience. A character who demonstrates resilience is not always a character who is healthy. It's not always the character who has, they've learned their lesson, they've healed completely, and yay, they get to go out into the rest of the world with nothing else, no obstacles facing them. Their mental health is perfect. That's usually not the case in real life, and it's not the case in books very often, nor should it be. It's much more inspiring to see someone like Katniss, who is traumatized by what's happening, still saying, I'm going to find the courage to take a stand here. I'm going to press forward in a way that ended up ultimately impacting her entire country. So don't feel that resilience means I have to have solved all the problems in the character's life and now they're perfectly fine and nothing's wrong and boom, that's how they're resilient. Resilience is actually born out of grit and anger and fear and determination, and I'm not going to stay down. I'm going to get back up. And then avoid preachiness. Again, nobody really loves to have either paragraphs of exposition or, Shakespeare forbid, dialogue. Having characters tell each other the theme of the story or preach the morality of the story back and forth to each other, not only is it an interruption in the flow of the story because it's not contributing to the conflict or the plot arc or the character development, it's not forwarding the momentum of the story, it's actually just really, really tedious and annoying. You get to a point where you're like, okay, you wouldn't actually say this to each other. It doesn't make any sense that this conversation's happening. You're only putting this in here to try to preach at the reader. If you want to preach to the reader, be a preacher. Absolutely. There's a platform for that. But if you want to be a writer, you learn the skills to do it in your storytelling. Let the themes emerge organically from the story rather than forcing a moral lesson. Readers should come to the conclusions about the message you're conveying on their own terms. And let me tell you, the lessons that readers will get from your books sometimes will be lessons that you were like, what? Oh, I had a person come up to me one time about one of my books, and she just, the way you did such and such, and the themes of this, and I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about.
But good job, me.
Yay for accidentally nailing that on the head. But that was not the goal. That was not in my head at all as I was writing. But that's what she saw, because she, as all readers do, they're going to come to your stories with their own lens, their own life experiences, their own baggage, their own biases. That's what she got. And it was a positive thing. So yay, she got that. Had it been a really negative thing and they were upset with me, I would have been like, actually, hang on, let's have a conversation about that. That is not at all what my intention was. But they're going to pick up different things from your books. And that's totally fine. They can do that. They have the right to come to their own conclusions. And if you feel like your work is consistently being misunderstood, guess what? That's on you. That's you. You haven't quite figured out how to dial in showing those themes and those messages through your character arcs. And that's okay, because that is fixable. You can go back and you can rework that, and you can look to see what am I missing here? How can I do this better?
One of my goals in life is, it's a very simple one. It's to not write cringe books or cringe scenes, right? Like, I want people to like my stuff, not avoid it. But we as humans tend to avoid people and situations, whether we should or not, that feel cringy or that feel like that secondhand embarrassment or that feel awkward. But that makes me think of some of these scenes that we sometimes see in books where they're writing the theme, but it's coming across as, the two characters having that conversation. And you kind of have this, like, as a reader, it pulls you out of the story because you're like, who are you talking to? Like, this is uncomfortable at this moment. Like, you're the person at the coffee shop that keeps talking, and I'm going to kind of slowly walk away because I have things to do, right? So don't be that person. There's my big motivation for the day. If you've learned nothing else from this class, don't be the cringe person. All right. So finally, number 3, let's talk about including your life lessons, faith, or values in your stories and how to do that well. So personal connections, stories that reflect your personal insights, beliefs, or life lessons often feel more authentic and engaging, right? You're not writing about somebody else that you heard of or some other situation or, something that isn't personal to you. When you're writing out of that sense of passion, out of that sense of your firm belief on something, that flows through into your story, and readers have that chance to connect with it because it feels authentic. So for instance, in my book, in fact, I actually have it sitting here. I think they're doing a giveaway on it through this class. But in my book, To Best the Boys, in that story, I'm addressing societal things in a way that has to do with like STEM education, right? But I wrapped all of that in a very Victorian era, the Scorpio races type atmosphere sense of a novel. If the Scorpio races met the Maze Runner, that would probably pretty much be To Best the Boys. And so in that story, though, I wanted to explore the role of women in society. So I set it in this Victorian society where men can go to college, but women can't because, hey, that's in our recent history. I also wanted to explore women who wanted to succeed in STEM areas, so science, medical, engineering, that type of stuff, but also explore the role of women who just wanted to be homemakers, and that both of those things are valid, both of those things are healthy, right? And so when it first came out, people were like, "Oh my gosh, is this book anti-boy?" No, I have boys in my own life, and I love them. It is not anti-boy, but it is pro exploring some of the beliefs that I have, some of the lessons that I've learned, some of the societal things that I wanted to challenge. And so, but I wrapped it in this fun, escape room type feeling where it's like, yeah, you've got a maze, you got to get out or you're going to die. But the winner, hey, if you succeed, you get to go to this all-male college. And so, of course, she dons a disguise, dresses as a boy so that she can enter this competition, so that she can win that scholarship to attend the college that she wants to save her mom. And so, and of course, we toss in some kissing and monsters. And CJ and I like the tagline, monsters, kissing, and murder. And I think that might sum up both of our stories pretty well. Mm-hmm. But with that, right? So we've wrapped those lessons, we've wrapped that faith, we've wrapped our values into something that is a really fun presentation, that is a fascinating story that you don't want to put down. But at the core of that, when people have approached me about that book, or when they've emailed me about that book, they never go, they don't just go, oh, I loved the maze. I loved all the different things, the monsters and the different things they had to accomplish. You know what they talked to me about? They talked to me about the fact that there's this sense of found family in the story, that there's a sense of a belief system, right? That they're like, I love the fact that you honored women, going into STEM, but you also honored women who just want to stay at home and be a stay-at-home mom. Because I did both, right? I mean, I homeschooled my kids for years and years and years. And yet I also was an entrepreneur and worked, so I understood both of those things, and I didn't like the either or. And so that belief comes through very strong in there. And people were so pleasantly surprised. It kind of caught me off guard, like, oh, doesn't everybody think this? But yet I also knew that they didn't, because that's why I was writing the book, because of some of the stuff that in my own life and in my daughter's life, who was going to college to get her psychology degree at the time, some of the stuff that she was running into. And my sister, she was running in, she was going to college for biochemistry, and she was running into similar situations. And so that's what that book came out of. So it was my personal insights based upon my experience and my family's experiences. And there were life lessons that I was like, I'm actually going to say something here. I have something to say about this to our society. And yet it didn't feel like a preaching book. I not once ever heard anybody say, oh, well, you kind of, little heavy handed there, ever, simply because they were authentic. And so that's what you do. What are the things in your life that you want to say? That if someone gave you a voice or a platform, which is your book, by the way, and your online platform, your physical platform, what would you say? Like, what are the things that matter to you? And you're going to make a list of those. You're going to write them down, because those are the things that other people are going to connect with. And then as you begin to shape your story, you decide how you want to put those in, right? You decide how you want those to flow through. So readers can often see themselves then reflected in that story. And that's what I've heard. I don't know how many people I have had come to me, email me and say, I'm a biochemist, and that is exactly how it was. Like this represents what I went through. Or, I'm an engineer, and women who've said, I went to school to be an engineer. And that is actually a lot how it felt. It felt like running through a maze and trying to survive in what felt like a male dominant, world at the time, or culture at the time, in those classes. So this connection can not only inspire readers, but it offers them new perspectives. And in my case, what I saw was that it really validated their own experiences. So the goal is then to balance that message with a story, right? If I'd come out and went here, as CJ said, here's the book, here's the message, I am now going to preach to you. Well, you might as well write a nonfiction book. And we edit a lot of nonfiction books, and there's such a great place for nonfiction, because that needs to be said. And if I'm going to read a nonfiction, just tell me the facts, ma'am. That's what I want. But in a fiction book, I don't want that nonfiction bleeding in so strong that I can't enjoy the story. And so making sure that you're able to balance the story with the narrative of the story, with the narrative of the theme that you want to share. The way you do that is your story will always come first. You can know exactly what you want to say, or maybe not. There are other stories where I've written, like with Storm Siren, my first book, I wrote that, and it was like, I'm writing monsters and I'm writing, overtaking a kingdom, and, Middle Ages, and kind of this Joan of Arc character mixed with like X-Men in the Middle Ages. That's what I was writing. And that's what I went into the story to write. And I didn't even discover my theme till the end. But once I discovered what that theme was, I went back and I made sure that I had wove that all the way through the story, because I wanted that balance. That narrative always comes first, but then you're going to balance it out with what you have to say. So, and like I said, with To Best the Boys, I started with the message first, and then I cultivated the story around that. Either way works. But for it to work in naturally, you have to give that theme. You have to weave that theme through the characters, through your different plot points, right? Your plot arc. You have to make sure that that character arc and the plot arcs, that those follow along with that theme, or at least that they give the opportunity to platform and sponsor that theme, so to speak, naturally. So, because otherwise your readers will think that you're lying, like in the sense of you're saying one thing, but we're not seeing that happen in the story that you've written. We're not seeing that authentically come through in the different the plot arc, but the areas where your main character is encountering obstacles. If those obstacles don't have anything to do with pushing forward the theme of the story, or pushing forward the character's arc of the story, we're not going to believe you. We're going to be like, you said this, but we actually don't see that in the story. We see something very different. And so making sure that those meld together. For example, in The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood, the author balances the tense dramatic storyline with deeper themes about autonomy, freedom, and resistance. So not only is the book engaging, right? You don't want to put it down because you're like, this is so dramatic and this society is absolutely insane, but also, and scary, right? Like we're like, I would hate to be in that society. But at the same time, it's thought-provoking because it makes us go, oh, what are areas in our own world where people still do not have autonomy? Where are areas in our own world where freedom is still not happening? And where are areas where it is appropriate to resist? Okay, that is what we had for you today. Let's now.
We have one. Nope. We have techniques.
Techniques for that. Yeah, I got ahead of myself.
You did.
So here's the techniques of how to do that. You're going to use real life. Draw from your own experiences or significant life events to shape your characters and plot. So, for example, if you've overcome a personal challenge, you can weave that struggle into your character's journey. Doesn't mean, as we've said, that you're weaving in the exact same challenge. It just means that you are weaving in how hard that felt, right? You're weaving in the feeling of that. You're weaving in the difficulties that surrounded that. So it's not that you in your own life have had a sword fight with someone. And so very clearly you can, to the death, and there very clearly you can put that in your story. Although if you have, I want to be friends with you and give me a call because I'm super fascinated with how this happened. But it's that you stepped back from that and understand that sense of, I know how it is though to be in a fight, or I know how it is to be tense with someone, or I know how it is to lose a relationship, or I know how it is to be challenged on something with somebody that I don't feel safe with or I don't feel comfortable with, right? It could be any of those kind of things. Or I know how it is in a romantic relationship to really want somebody and to have obstacles come against me where that's just not going to work out. Those are all things that if you've figured out, overcome, found those themes in your own life, you're going to weave those struggles into your character's journey. Your character cannot have an arc if they don't have struggles. So, when we talk about kill your darlings, this is a lot of like, don't actually kill your character unless they are meant to die, because some of them are, let's be honest. But this is what we're talking about, of you have to bring them to the point of death. So if you have bubble wrapped your character and you're taking them through your story, readers aren't going to believe you. They're not going to connect with that character because our lives don't feel bubble wrapped. I don't know about you, but I wish my life felt bubble wrapped, but it doesn't. And so we see ourselves in stories when we see them, our characters who we're putting ourselves in the minds of, encountering similar types of struggles, right? And encountering things coming against their dreams or their goals. It may not be that that's stopped your dream of being a ballet dancer, but it could be that that did stop, this overarching dream that you have, to buy a car. I don't know. But how frustrating that can be to feel like, man, I've worked so hard. I keep saving money and, I just like this never pans out. You know what that feels like. So that's what you're going to take over there and go, okay, I'm going to put this character in a situation where no matter how hard they work, no matter what they do, it never pans out, right? It's never their time. They never get to just have a win. We all know how that feels. So that's what you're doing for your character. So you're going to weave that struggle into their journey over and over and over again, right? Till they just feel battered and beat up. It's kind of like storms hitting a ship. And then that is what's going to add that authenticity and depth to your story, because your character is going to feel beat up and we're going to be able to connect with that and go, that's totally how it feels. But at the same time, then we're going to see them overcome that. We're going to see the message that they learn, the message that you want to communicate in the midst of that, as your character refuses to give up. That message comes through because your character struggled and didn't quit. You're going to balance personal insights with universal themes. So while your story may be rooted in personal beliefs or experiences, as so often most of ours are, we also want to ensure that it resonates with a wider audience. And you do this by linking those personal insights with universal themes. So you may have an opinion on something. You may have and to best the boys, I had an opinion on the way that women are often treated in STEM. In medical community, in the science world, in schooling, right? And the access that women have, or the, underrepresented access that they have. So I had an opinion on that, but yet to a certain extent, that's a universal theme. But for me, it was very personal, but I wasn't going to write in, my daughter's story actually, or my sister's story, or my own story. What I was going to write in though, was that deeper theme of autonomy, of independence, of feeling worthy, of feeling that you are respected and valued, whichever decision that you make, because it's your decision, right? You get to choose your future, your destiny. You get to embrace the future that you want for yourself. And yet so my goal was to weave that into that universal theme of, here's what I'm addressing, but here's the bigger issue. Here's something that everybody can relate to, is that sense of being controlled and not being allowed to do what you believe you were made to do. Everybody runs into that at some point. So that was the universal theme that I tied into, is having the freedom to do what you want.
And I have an example for that as well. The Traitor Prince is one of the books in my Ravenspire series, which is a series of dark epic fantasies inspired by fairy tales. And for that book, I have the main character have a very strong faith in the God of their religion in that kingdom. And I tied that to my own faith experiences. And so I explored what it looked like to think that this was God's purpose for your life, and then to end up somewhere completely different, somewhere that looked bad. He was framed for murder and tossed into an underground prison. And the only way out was to fight in a tournament against, gladiator style tournament against magical creatures in order to win an audience with his father, the king, who was aging and sick, and convince him that the wrong boy was on the throne because he'd been away for 10 years and hadn't seen his father during that time. And I could have leaned really heavily into preaching and talking about, here, this is what I want you to know about my faith, and this is why it's important. But instead, I just allowed my character to have a human experience of he's had his destiny. He was supposed to finish his education in this, prestigious boarding school in another kingdom and come home and take over the throne and rule justly throughout his kingdom and have a long and prosperous life. This is what his feet had been set on this path since he was little. He was not supposed to end up in this very violent, dangerous underground prison with no hope of getting out unless he could survive these incredibly dangerous tournaments against these creatures he doesn't know how to defeat. God was not supposed to abandon him there. And I have this moment where you could see his faithfulness continue, but you see the doubt creep in until you finally see him crying out, like, why am I here? Why did you abandon me? And that's when he hears the soft voice saying, I haven't abandoned you. I'm with you the whole way. And this is where you're supposed to be. Open your eyes, basically. And he realizes that he's actually seen systemic injustices that have been happening in his kingdom for a long time that he would never have seen had he just gone onto the throne. What I wanted to do is explore what it can look like for us, for people of faith, to have that road yanked out from underneath us and be dumped on a different path than what we thought we were going to be on. And what does it look like to keep your faith? And what does it look like to still follow and listen and to learn those lessons? And so rather than really hit that hard and, have preachy bits of dialogue and exposition about it, I just let the character's actions speak for himself. And I get a lot of letters and a lot of people coming to me at book festivals to talk about how that moved them, including people who are not people of faith, just saying, I haven't seen faith portrayed in this way before because I'm published in the general market rather than Christian fiction. And so this is what we're talking about when we say balancing those personal insights with universal themes. The universal themes that I was exploring there were themes of feeling abandoned, of feeling like everything that I had laid out in my life is suddenly gone, and I've lost. I have this sense of loss and the sense of a loss of identity and not knowing what to do next and where to go next. And everybody can relate to that on some level. But it allowed me to then explore this message of faith, even while I was, putting in the trappings of magical monsters and gladiator tournaments in this prison and all of these other things. But by giving it those universal themes, I was able to put in the personal themes as well.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I love that. We have all experienced at one point or another. And if you haven't, you will, sorry, that dark night of the soul. And so that's why I'm so passionate about always having something, even if it's not the dredges of the darkness, there always has to be that dark night of the soul in some way where we have this reckoning within ourselves. We have a reckoning. Your character has that reckoning, usually right at the climax, right? When everything has hit the fan and everything is falling apart, there's that moment where they have that dark night of the soul. And the reason it's so important is because that's where they learn their lesson. That's where they figure things out. That's where that small, soft voice comes to them. But it's what they're having in that moment is they're reckoning with what they thought was going to be with what is. They're reckoning with what they desired, like at the beginning of the story, what we desire at the beginning of our lives versus what things have ended up as. And so this is where we're at. Now, what are we going to do with that? And we've all had that moment, right? We've all had multiple climaxes in our lives similar to that, probably, where it's like, this is not what I thought it was going to be. This is not where I thought I was going to be. And now how do I recognize that? Or, how do I wrestle with that? And what happens with my faith in the midst of that, right? What happens with my belief system? Do I tear those down? Or do I allow those to take me further? And usually what happens, at least in, I'll say in my stories, not in everybody's story, but in my stories and in my own life, it's that when I wrestle with that, I find a new normal, right? I find that my faith has grown bigger. I find that aspects of my world, while those, stay by the wayside, other aspects of my world grow bigger in a way that I wasn't expecting. And so, yes, that's exactly what we're talking about. I recall actually someone one time, one of my, I think 1-star reviews at one point with Storm Siren was someone was a Christian, was critical, a person of faith, because they said, yeah, but she didn't actually talk about God in her book. She just called him the creator. And they were very bothered by this. And I just laughed. I was like, it's like not even a real society. And that's what you're complaining about. Like everything in the book is made up. You do realize this, right? So, but then I had other people who would go, I wouldn't have picked this up if I knew that this was published by a Christian publisher, but yet I loved the story, right? Like I don't do Christian books, and to me, I'm like, I don't either. So I don't read them either. Like I want what I want, right? As readers, we want what we want. And so what I want is the experience of relatability. Avoid overpreaching. Subtlety is key. Instead of overtly preaching or imposing your views, allow your characters and narrative to naturally reflect your values. So people all over the world have a different, they have, as we know, they have different faiths. They have different belief systems. They have different perspectives. And most of those are based on how they were raised, the culture they're in, the society they're in. We're not homogenous, thank goodness. So when we act in our books as if everybody is homogenous, as if our belief system is homogenous to the rest of the world, it actually separates us from readers, right? It distances the reader from your story. So like in this 1-star reviewer's case, if I had put the names and specifics of my faith, I'm not opposed to that, but it wasn't relative. It wasn't appropriate for the story. It would have taken over the story and it would have been out of place in the story. I wove in my values. I wove in my faith in a way that worked in harmony, in synchrony with the story. But it also worked in a way that didn't assume that everybody believes exactly the same way I do, and that assumes that everybody has the same language that I do, that, that uses the same language for their faith, or even has the same beliefs that I do. It was simply that was my platform to say, well, this is where my beliefs come in, right? This is what I value. These are the things that are important to me. But yet at the same time, I went back to, but universally, what could everybody connect with? Doesn't mean we water stuff down, but it also doesn't mean that we separate or put distance between us, our story, and the reader, simply because they're like, oh, that must not be for me. That must not apply for me, right? And that was the reaction that I was getting from some of these other people who were going, oh, if I'd known this was a Christian book, because they automatically go, oh, well, inspirational books are not for me. And it's like, yeah, I actually, I get that. And that's okay. But they were pleasantly surprised because they went, oh, but I loved this one. So this invites your readers to engage with the story on their own terms. Example, rather than having a character directly state a moral lesson about whatever, show how their actions and decisions reflect their inner beliefs. Because we can connect with someone when it's their inner belief more than when the author is preaching at us, right? I don't want an author to preach at me. I want to figure it out on my own, but I will respect a character who has specific beliefs because I understand why they have those beliefs. And I respect the fact that lots of people in my life have different beliefs. Do you want to add anything to that, CJ?
No, I think you covered it. And I know that we're out of time. And so we are so grateful that we were invited to be here. We have one last slide for you that will show you where you can connect with us online. You can connect with us at thewriterssanctuary.com. You will find places to connect there for mentorship, community, education. Our newsletter is free and always has great information for you every single month. The Red Herring Society is our secret writing society that has so much for you there. You can check that out. We've got workshops and webinars and mentorship every month there, a very active community, places to find critique groups, all kinds of freebies and writing sprints, all kinds of good stuff. You can also connect with us on Instagram at The Writer's Sanctuary, at Mary Weber Author, or at CJ Redwine. And we've got a picture up here of the Storyteller's weekly journal, which is coming out at the end of October. This is our consumable. It's like if a planner, a bullet journal, and a book telling you how to write divorced and be ready to pitch a book in 12 months, all got together and had a baby. Don't think about that imagery for too long, but this is the result here. And we're super excited to put that in everyone's hands. We are also so thankful that they are giving away copies of our books today. You can enter by clicking the button on this page to enter the giveaway. They're giving away a copy of The Shadow Queen. This is book 1 in the Ravenspire series for me. This is the dark epic fantasy inspired by the Snow White fairy tale, in which Snow White is a powerful sorceress in her own right and has been a fugitive for many years, and must take down the evil queen before she ends up destroying Ravenspire. And the prince is a dragon shapeshifter, you're welcome, who has been magically bound to rip out Lorelai's heart. Drama.
And they're also giving away a copy of To Best the Boys, which I was referring to earlier, which is my STEM-inspired, female awesome empowerment story where, and there's romance actually. The main boy Lute is quite something, but this is the story of a girl who wants to save her mom and from a medical illness, and so she decides she wants to go to college, except that all the universities are only men are allowed to go to university, and so she decides to enter the scholarship competition to see if she can win a scholarship to get there. But to do so, her and her cousin and best friend will have to don disguises, enter the competition, and they'll have to survive it and come out on top in order to do so. So,
all right.
We're excited for that. We're excited that hope you guys enter. Hope you got one of you. We're excited for whoever wins. And thanks for having us, Brett. This has been a lot of fun. We've had a great
Yes, it has. Thank you.
No, thank you both so much. I just enjoyed the whole presentation as you shared. And really, I want to say, the kind of stories that you described of wanting to write books that change lives, books where that balances that light and darkness, but where the darkness doesn't win. I mean, these are the kind of stories our students want to write as we work with them, as they share kind of the stories that are on their heart, as we see the kind of stories they're striving to be able to tell. It's exactly the kind of stories that we're teaching them how to tell and how to work towards that.
Yeah.
And I just love the emphasis on these are skills that take time, learning how to do this with subtlety, learning how to not be preachy. These are skills that take time. But guys, as we always tell you, if you start young and you stick with it, you really have the opportunity to achieve higher and higher levels of competence and skill to really tell those stories that can be that safe, comforting home book for someone else. And I just love this whole presentation. So thank you both. Again, Mary and CJ are people that we look up to and learn from for all the pioneering work that they do as authors and as teachers in this industry. So thank you for joining us. God bless both of you. And guys, we will be wrapping up our summit. Thank you for being part of it. And we will see you for our last session in a little bit. All right. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.